All right, David. For this podcast, if we could just keep you on mute for most of the time, so you don't have to cough and get all your like germs and sickness all over, the microphone and camera and yuckiness. Can we
Yeah,
make
Molly,
that
you're
okay?
gonna have to excuse Stu. Sometimes we have to explain things that are basic to you and I that like I can't transmit via the microphone or Trons. I can't transmit sickness that way. So we're relatively safe on Zoom. Stu, I know this is
Wow.
novel, but I think that it's important to point out that I think you guys are gonna be good. You'll be fine.
Wow. It sounds like Stu's a little paranoid. I'm just getting to know you guys, and I'm just gonna say the obvious.
I just don't like to be sick, I mean, so like David, you can just stay at home for the rest of this week. When you're like 100% fully better, then you can come back to office, come back to work. Because I got enough like sickness going around in our family and like all the kids passing to each other in the school and all that stuff. I know you know the feeling. Molly, I know you know the feeling too, right?
Oh yeah, it's a thing. It's a thing. Within the first week of school, everyone's sick. So let's
Yep.
gear up, right?
Yep. Yep. Yeah, my son came down with pneumonia on Friday and was like hacking up a lung all weekend long and he had to miss baseball games. He was like super bummed. He's like
Oh,
coughing up lung. He's like, Dad, I can play. I can play. And he like was like crying and like it was a mess. It was a mess.
oh, that
So
stinks. If it was one of us older, we would be like in bed, like soaking it up, like, oh, I'm really sick. But the kids, they just keep trying to go on.
keep on going. That's right. That's right. Well, Molly, it's welcome to the Connect Man podcast. We're excited about this conversation. You're doing some amazing work here locally in Denver, Colorado, where all of us are. And um, let's just dive in. If you could just give our audience a little bit of background about who you are and what do you do?
Yeah, thanks. Well, thank you guys for having me. It's been fun to connect and just even see the ministry and impact you guys are having here locally as well. And so, just a quick background on me is I grew up in Wisconsin, and I actually I didn't grow up in a faith background. I was the youngest of five kids, and it was just through an ordinary, everyday person, my dance teacher. She was the first person to really share God with me. Like I was kind of at a point in my life where I'd moved around quite a bit, and honestly was kind of lonely, didn't see my parents having a great relationship, saw a lot of brokenness, and just figured there's got to be something more that I'm missing, right? And so my dance teacher had come to faith a couple of years ago, and as soon as I met her, she just kind of said to me simply, like, Molly, like what you're looking for is to be connected back to the first relationship you ever had, which was with God. That's why Jesus came, is to connect you back to him, and through that relationship you're going to find kind of some of that peace and like the longings that you're looking for. And I never had anyone say it to me that simply, like, wow, really, like that really is what I'm looking for. And so I just started kind of a relationship with God, started growing in my faith. And fast forward kind of to college, I was just at a point in my life where I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do, and just really kind of felt like the Lord put on my heart that he wanted me to help pass this on to other people, kind of like this secret, right, that I had found. He wanted me to share it with others. And I honestly, since I didn't grow up in church, I never really saw myself fitting into like a traditional church setting. I didn't really know like what that impact was going to look like. And then fast forward, met my husband, and he came to faith through a campus ministry. And so we worked in campus ministry for about 12 years, kind of in Oklahoma. We were at CU Boulder, where people say like campus ministries go to die because no one wants to know Jesus there. But it's actually not true. No one's just telling them about Jesus, is the truth, right? So we just really loved what we were doing, but really started seeing students graduating college and moving to Denver, and really like just not walking into church. Like these were young professionals. No one prepares you for these things, right? Like you're in college, and the whole time you're in school, you kind of have these built-in networks and connections that you don't really even realize are there. And then you graduate and you're kind of at the bottom of your career. You don't know anybody. You're having to figure out all these things on your own. And it's really isolating. It's really lonely. And so yeah, my heart just broke for people who are coming to Denver. Maybe we're open to things of God, but weren't walking into church and getting connected. And so that's kind of where the idea of the Brook kind of started, and where God put that in my heart.
Well, and your website mentions, and this was surprising to me, that Denver is one of the most lonely cities. And
Hmm.
I think that really surprised me. One, because I don't know why Denver would necessarily be, but two, Denver or Colorado is such an outdoor, such a like an outgoing place for those that are looking for adventure and a lot of these things, in my mind, at least when I do them, they're
Yeah.
not solitary activities. Like when we go to the mountains, we're snowboarding with buddies, we're going fishing with buddies, like we're doing all these things. And so it really shocked me. Why is Denver known to be such a lonely place?
Yeah, so it's actually, yeah, the third loneliness after Washington D.C. and Vegas. Next, the third is Denver. And to your point, what you said, yeah, people are flocking to Denver like crazy for the fun, the outdoor, and the adventure. But when you come here by yourself, you don't know anybody, and just imagine that you climb to a mountaintop and you get to the top, and you're by yourself and you wish you could share that experience with somebody else. It actually heightens the feeling of loneliness. Like, who wants to look at a beautiful sunset by themselves? Like, you wish you had somebody to share it with, right? And so I think you're right. People come here for the fun and the adventure, but when you aren't making friends and you don't have anybody to share those activities with, I think it actually heightens the sense of loneliness.
So, also on your website, you say that the modern landscape of work and life can often leave individuals feeling disconnected and isolated.
Mm-hmm.
We're in this we're in this digital world where we are the most connected that we've ever been, right? With the social
Yes.
media and the emails and the text messages and like all the stuff, right?
Yeah.
How can we possibly feel isolated and disconnected in such a disconnected world, in such a
Yeah.
connected world?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's kind of like our friendships are like a mile wide, but an inch deep, right? And I
Mhm.
think we see this a lot, like in, COVID, the pandemic definitely didn't help, but we see now that people are like living by themselves and working from home. And so they're not having to go out as much. And so it creates this sense of isolation. Like you're not in community, you're not forced to be with other people. And I think it really breeds a sense of isolation. And that's actually why when we started the Brook, the first place we launched was online. So we kind of say we use the means of digital outreach and in-person events to kind of impact our community. And so we do a lot on Instagram because we know that's where people live nowadays. Like that's where they're scrolling, that's where they live. And we really, our goal is to intercept their scrolling. We actually have a whole online connections team that like literally follows people, reaches out to people, says, "Hey, I saw you liked our post or you followed us. We'd love to get you connected. Hey, I would love to meet you at our next event." So we're trying to intercept that space where people are living online and get them to come and connect in community, because actually that's what like spaces like Instagram, they actually were originally meant to connect people, not just to showcase like the favorite best parts of your life and like your good look. They really were meant to originally connect people. And so we're kind of going old school and saying, hey, you know what? This is where people are living, but let's use these platforms and let's actually use them to connect people offline and in person.
Yeah, and so Molly, tell us about the Brook. Tell us what you guys are doing and really the why behind it. And then Stu, Molly said something which probably doesn't really resonate, but she said it's a place where people go to show how good looking they are. That's why your presence on Instagram is pretty minimal. Sorry, I love you.
I'm gonna choose not to comment. I'm gonna be the bigger man here.
Oh man, I love it. That's amazing. So yeah, I guess kind of just to give you kind of a big overview of the Brook, like I said, yeah, we start by connecting with people online. Like I said, we use the means of digital outreach, and a lot of that is Instagram. So we do a lot of content on Instagram, showcasing what it looks like to have a great life, great relationships, and investigate faith. So those are kind of the main things we talk about. And really, our platform is just showcasing everyday people in the Brook. So we talk a lot about purpose, a lot about relationships, a lot about like job, finances. What does it look like to investigate faith, right? So we kind of showcase what that looks like. And we have, like I said, teams that connect with people online. And then from there, a lot of people will fill out one of our forms, that are our new form. And from there, we connect them with an individual in the Brook. Since the time we launched the Brook, we always wanted like the people in the Brook to be like super approachable, where you can actually connect with a human being, right? Do you guys ever get annoyed when you try to call like a company or and you're just like, I want to talk to the person? Like, oh my gosh, I'm
Yeah,
so tired
don't
of this
send me to a
message.
computer.
Yes. Oh my gosh. It's so annoying. But we want to be
But do you
accessible.
ever like stop and realize you're like, wow, I'm actually frustrated and raising my voice at a computer? Like, do you ever do that part? Because that's normally where I get. I'm like, I'm actually I'm emotionally responding to something that has no emotions. But anyways, that's not the point. Please continue, Molly.
Yes. I'm guilty of that. I am guilty of that. But yeah, so we try to like meet people online, connect them with somebody in person, to do like a FaceTime call, get to know you. And we always train like our volunteers to say, hey, I'd love to like meet you at the next event because no one wants to go alone, right? So like, why don't you meet me at the next happy hour? So we do a happy hour once a month somewhere like some cool venue around the city. And we typically have about 150 people show up. And always half of those people are new. Like half of the people every time are new, looking for connection, community. And our happy hours literally are just a connecting event. Like people come, we do fun, like it always sounds silly when I say icebreakers, but we'll do like bingo, we'll do trivia, we'll do like silent disco, something fun that helps people actually connect, get to know each other, build relationships. And it doesn't matter your faith or your spiritual background, like you would have fun at one of our events, right? So we always like to just make it an easy place to get to know people and mingle. And we have volunteer teams that run the whole thing, that plan the events. And so that's another part of the Brook that I really love is like young professionals generally have some extra time and space. And so we have like a great volunteer crew. So we do one of those once a month, and then we also do something called a community night once a month. And that really, we speak to like a topic that's relevant to young professionals. So like the last one we did was on faith and work. Like, how do faith and work go together? Do they even go together? And we have people coming in just asking lots of questions based around this topic. And then we always have like roundtable discussion because young professionals like love hearing from their peers, right? And like talking and getting to know each other. So that's a really fun once a month event that we do as well. And then from there, we do have an app. And when we launched the Brook, we were so up in the air. Like, do you do an app or not? Because either apps like tank, we've all downloaded like an app that you never use again in your life. Like you download it and you're like, why did I download that? Like I will never use that again. But we built an app and it's actually gone over so well. I think my favorite part of the app is that we're kind of making like social media, like the app social, by having social channels. So in our app, we have channels that people can join. We have a couple thousand people, and there's like a Brook Sports channel. So we have people typing in the channel all the time, like, hey, going to play pickup basketball. Hey, we're going camping. Hey, we're going to play volleyball. Want to join? Like anyone can join, anyone can post in it. We have roommates channels because young professionals are moving on average once a year. And so if we can help them by finding a roommate through our roommates channel, like it adds a ton of value to like an immediate need of theirs, basically. So just like lots of different channels. We actually have a work from home channel because like kind of like you said, Stu, like so many people are isolated and working by themselves. It's like, why not meet at a coffee shop and work together? And people actually, like young professionals, will pay for apps nowadays that help them do these things. Like they will pay for apps that will help them connect and find friends. And so we're kind of getting to provide that for free through what we're doing on our app. So that's really fun. But then, yeah, kind of the kind of last thing and the thing that I actually am most passionate about is something called Simple Church. And so our simple churches are just small communities, probably around 8 people or so, that meet together on a weekly basis, like in a home, in an apartment, or in a bar somewhere. And they help keep each other accountable. They read a part of the Bible, and then they just apply it to their life that week. And we have over 500 young professionals that are meeting in like these simple churches throughout the city of Denver, like growing together. And really why we call them simple church is because it's simple to follow, but it really is like a spiritual family. It's different from a Bible study in that it's not just like one topic over 8 weeks and the group ends. Like we have groups that have been together for 3.5 years and they've seen people in their groups get married, lose loved ones, like stick together. And I think in the city of Denver, where like half the people are transplants, having a spiritual family is really huge. And the reality is too, like a lot of people have moved to Denver to go hike and ski on the weekends. So going to church really isn't their top priority. And honestly, a lot of people maybe have been hurt from the church or have baggage. So walking into a simple church where they can connect with individuals, ask their questions without feeling strange, has been really, taken down barriers that a lot of people have when it comes to their faith journey.
I'm curious, you bring up church. We had we had a pastor on as a guest. He was an author as well, and he's in Dallas, and another really big city. And he had mentioned that in his church, it's a pretty young professionals church. There's a lot of, 20 to 40-year-olds. But he said that there's a lot of women that are going to this church, but very little men. There's a lot of
Mm,
single women that are going to the church, but very little men.
mhm.
And he's like, I don't know what's going on. Like, why is this happening? Do you see any of that in the Brook? Is there a lot more women coming to events than men coming to events?
Oh, this is a great question. And so when we first started the Brook about 3 years ago, we had a lot more women coming at first. I would say it was probably, um, oh, yeah, maybe like 60 or 70% women and 30% men. And we've actually been praying over the last like year and a half that we would have more men get involved. And how it works is usually where the girls are, the guys start coming.
That's what I'm saying. This is just smart math, right? Like
It's
if I
just
were a
smart
single
math.
dude, I'd be like, okay, you church and these groups. Yeah, all
Yep,
day.
yep, totally. So exactly to your point, we've actually started having a lot of men come. So I would actually say at our events now, it's about 50-50%. And I think even a lot of like the sports and things like that that we do really welcome in men as well. Like in the summer, we always have like probably most weekends, there's a group of like 50 people playing volleyball at the park, right? So I'd say it's about half and half, but something interesting that I've seen when it comes to our simple churches is this, that women tend to sign up really quickly for our simple churches and they'll like fill up really fast. But women tend to have this kind of personality, and maybe it's a generalization, but like they just are very social. Like it's like, oh yes, I'll do everything and I'll do too much. I like put too many things on my plate, right? And so a lot of times like we see those groups like shrink quite a bit. So we fill the groups up quite a bit because we know they're going to shrink. When it comes to the men's groups, we see that men are much slower to sign up. Like they may like just hang around the Brook for like a year or two before they ever even sign up for a simple church. But once they do sign up, we actually see that the men then become like really committed. And so it's kind of a different process. It almost feels like it takes the guys a little bit longer to warm up to the like being open and being a part of a group, but once they are, they kind of, it seems like they kind of commit and like go for it. And then the women are kind of like, oh sure, I'll do everything, and like, oh my gosh, I'm so overwhelmed, I can't come anymore. um, but yeah, it is, I do agree. I think there always tends to be more women heavy, especially in spiritual realms. But we have really tried to lean into even like the like I said, just like things that guys like to do, men's camping trips, things like that. And we have seen like overall things even out a little bit more.
As you were talking, I'm taking notes and a couple things just hit my mind as far as observations. I'm curious on your observations if you've seen or can attribute any of these issues. So specifically, talked about the church and numbers are declining, right? Like it's an issue, and you guys are doing something specifically to address it because it's not just about numbers in church. It's about people being fed spiritually, right? Like it's about the fulfillment of a life of
Mhm.
faith and even just understanding, what that means being exposed to it. But you also talk about friendship and like it's such a fascinating thing, and we see this in our men's group all the time. But it's almost like we've forgotten or lost the skill of how to make friends, and it's
Mm,
so difficult now. And I think we're more prone now to try to find an app, which there's no judgment in that, but an
yeah.
app, something how instead of like, hey, why don't I go and like connect with this person and be like, you know what? Do you want to be friends? Like we did when we were kids, right? My kids don't have any huge issues with this type of stuff. So I'm curious on your observations, particularly on this younger generation that you focus on. What is have you gotten any feedback from them on why it has become so difficult to just have what we would probably attribute to normal human interactions?
Yeah.
And I say normal, I don't mean to say that to stereotype or to isolate or to even bring shame to it. It just throughout the history of the world, the
Mm-hmm.
time that we're in now is a blip, right? This technological age is so new and it's so insignificant from a time perspective, but it's so huge in almost making us less human in our interactions and unable to create these relational things that we desire so strongly. So have you gotten any feedback on what, or have you come to any conclusions on why that's becoming such a huge issue?
Yeah, no, this is actually something I was talking to a friend about earlier this week. And really, about 8 years ago, I started seeing a shift in culture where before that 8 years, I saw there was a lot of, because I was in campus ministry before, and a lot of people would come and ask for advice and questions, or if they're about to get married or have a baby, like they were like coming and asking me questions and asking for guidance. And then about 8 years ago, I saw this shift where I was like, how come people aren't asking these questions as much anymore? And I realized we've become a YouTube generation where if we have a question, we go to Google or we go on YouTube and ask it for an answer. We don't go to a human being. And the problem with that is, yeah, you can find a lot of information online, sometimes not the best or most accurate information, but it's also not tailored to you. And it's not also led like by the spirit through somebody who can speak life into your specific situation. And so I really think that this generation right now has been used to just going online to get information. And so like the friendship and asking a person for advice or asking a person to connect is kind of like opposite of like where the connection is coming from. And so that's even something that through our videos that we train people on, even before coming to a happy hour, we'll do a video that's like, hey, here's a couple tips on how to get to know somebody, like basic social skills. It sounds so funny, but we'll be like, hey, look them in the eye, ask them a question, ask somebody to get coffee. I'll always say, like, nobody's ever been upset. I've never been once upset because somebody asked me to get coffee. If anything, I've been flattered, right? So just like I feel like there needs that this generation, like that training around it. And just those things that maybe sound basic, like that we need to be reminded of, are really essential.
But Stu, I know you have a great question, and just one comment. It also it hits me as a parent, right? Like I'm constantly emphasizing with my kids, hey, look them in the eye when you like look at them. Stop what you're doing right now. Look at them, right? And it hits me because there's a huge impact, and a lot of us want to blame things like cell phones and apps and all these kind of things. But at the end of the day, we should look in the mirror first, right? And the problem is if we are not doing it and they're not plugging into your group, right? Like they're now going to teach their kids to even be less competent relationally and less human. And
Absolutely.
this whole YouTube thing, YouTube's a great resource, but
Yeah.
YouTube can't answer your questions back in the moment either. And not a great place to, you're just getting whatever it is that you're being fed on it.
Yeah, I was just gonna share like I have three kids. So I have a 13-year-old daughter in eighth grade, a 10-year-old and an 8-year-old, and we have a dog. And I'm just gonna be completely honest, I'm actually not really a dog person. Like our dog is like the bottom of our totem pole in our house. I'm like, okay, I want to take care of the rest of my family. If the dog gets taken care of, that's fine. But of course, like everybody, we have a dog. Why? Because the kids wanted the dog. And so our dog was having some issues, and I had my 13-year-old call the vet. Like I had her get the phone out. I had her look at reviews, find a vet to call, and like schedule an appointment because it seems so funny, but even that, I'll talk to professionals that like don't want to call anybody and talk on the phone. Like it's just like I don't want to call anyone. I just want to text. I don't
Can I
want to talk on
text the
the phone.
vet? I want to text the vet.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was like, hey, Taylor, you're gonna call, you're gonna make this appointment. Like, and it sounds so silly, but like our kids are completely capable of doing those things. But we do, like you said, we need to train them. We need to teach them how to do those things as well.
And just think, what's AI going to do? How is that going to impact? You know,
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
there's a question that we talk about in intimacy month inside of our men's group. And it's kind of tailored towards you, like, is television, Hollywood, radio, pornography, how is
Yeah.
that impacting our intimacy? How is it impacting intimate relationships? And I think that could go the same thing with just like friendship and connection. How is this digital world, how is this Instagram life impacting intimacy? Is
Mm.
and similarly, we had a lady come on our podcast. It'll come out in a few weeks, and she's a matching expert. She matches couples,
Yeah.
and it's taking longer and longer and longer. She says for men and women to get married. And I
Mhm.
think a lot of it is tied to this kind of stuff. I'm curious what you've seen, and how that's impacting relationships.
Yeah, no, I think that's it's something we talk about quite often. And with the Brook, we actually have an event coming up October 10th. It's called our relationships event, and we talk about singleness, dating. And I was just going through our panel questions for the event, and one of the questions was like, how is pornography impacting like relationships now and future relationships? And I do think it is a huge barrier to our view of relationships, right? Like what someone experiences through that directly impacts like your ability to connect with somebody in a human way, right? Like a person in front of you. And so I think if we aren't talking about pornography, if we're not talking about even like friendships and how to develop friendships, or like a lot of times people talk about what are your standards for somebody you're looking for to date. Well, what about your standards you're looking for somebody to be your friend? We talk more about like standards for dating, but like we have all these friends that are really horrible influences on us, right? And so I think yeah, like talking openly about all these topics is super huge because like your friend talked about, we see people getting older and older and older and being single and just having baggage that they're not dealing with, that I really think is prolonging and prohibiting their ability to connect with somebody else and to have that life that they're wanting, to find a significant other for sure.
Well, yeah, I was listening to a podcast recently within the last year, and it was a couple of younger men were talking, and I was completely taken aback by the normalization. The topic was porn,
Mm-hmm.
and I was completely taken aback by the normalization in the conversation between these two gentlemen about their use of porn.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was completely taken aback by the normalization of the number of partners that this guy had, and how porn had played a part in that, and the STDs that were acquired. And these are young, successful, highly listened to show. And it was just like, well, that's just kind of a consequence of these decision chain. And we talk about friendships and normalization, and how you do that. How are
Wow.
you addressing the normalization of the things that you guys are talking about? Right. Because I feel like it's a huge uphill battle.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it could be overwhelming. And Stu and I are completely committed to the men in our group. And
Yeah.
sometimes if you don't express gratitude for the group that you have and the impacts that are being made in it with the men, it's easy to look at the tidal wave of dudes not in the group and be like, man, like, are we making a dent? And we are
Yes.
not, are we normalizing things
Yeah.
into a higher standard versus what you see? And I'm sure that it's very similar in what you're doing. And so how are you guys, is it just like, just one after the other? Is that kind of how you approach this? Or how are you making the normalization in Denver
Yeah.
and ultimately something that could impact the world and what you guys are doing?
Absolutely. And this is actually my favorite part is um making disciples that multiply. So the cool thing about young professionals, like I said, they have extra time. And as we look back in history, all the great mission movements that have happened have started with younger people because they have the ambition and the time and the energy to do it. And so we kind of have the system with the Brook where anyone that is a simple church leader is in a once a month coaching group. And so they'll come with other leaders who are also leading simple churches. We'll do accountability, we do teaching, we keep the vision in front of them. And we, like last month, I met with a group of women and we talked about singleness and dating. We talked about what the Bible says about sex before marriage, living with your boyfriend, all these different topics very openly. And then what they do is they go back to their groups and they go through this content with their group. So we're basically passing on. And I always say discipleship is just passing on a way of life. That's what Jesus did with the 12 disciples. He lived with them, he passed on to them a way of living that they would then go on to pass on to others to impact the rest of the world. And so, really raising up everyday leaders is kind of the way that we pass on and change the culture. We really do need to change the culture. But again, I can't meet with every single person. We have hundreds of people involved, but I can meet with the leaders and I can train them to go and train the people that are following them. And so kind of that discipleship principle of training leaders and having them pass it on, kind of like the 12 disciples did.
Molly, what what do you think the difference is between something like the Brook and church? Like, why are churches, I would almost say, failing at
Mm.
community and events and small groups?
Yeah.
And why are you guys seeing a lot of success in these, these simple churches and getting
Yeah.
people in community? Like, what's the
Mhm.
difference? Like, why is one not working?
Yeah, no, and that's a great question. And the reason I absolutely love this question is because I kind of get to work in this non-traditional sector. But on the flip side, my husband is actually the lead pastor of a church in
Oh,
Denver.
nice.
And so I get a view into both worlds. And I just love
Just
that
make sure
there's
he doesn't
not
listen to this. Stu wasn't talking about your husband. He's talking
That's
about the
right.
other
All the other
pastors.
churches.
all
All
the
the other
other,
pastors,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
their
His church is
family.
great.
You guys are crushing it.
He's crushing it. But well, the point is that there's not a one size fits all, is I think what I'm trying to say is like, and I think one of the reasons the Brook's done really well is because, I will say, I think that the American church does decent when it comes to like connecting with people who have younger kids or even up through high school and college. There's lots of programs. And then there's kind of this whole gap in your 20s and 30s when you're single. And that gap is becoming wider because people aren't getting married till they're older. That kind of gets neglected. And honestly, it should be a time where we're really doubling down because these people eventually are going to get married, and what they do in that single time is what they're going to bring into marriage. And then once you get married, there's kind of programs sometimes in the church for if you're married or have kids, that sort of thing. But I really think there is a gap when it comes to this age group and demographic of young professionals in their 20s and 30s. And so I think one reason even the Brook has done really well is because we've just doubled down on a niche kind of group of people. Like we're not trying, sometimes, when you try to reach everyone, you reach no one, right? That's like the saying. And that's kind of what you guys are doing too, right? Like we're really doing what we feel like God's called and put on our heart. And so we're kind of here to really serve the city of Denver and all the churches of Denver by connecting with people that might not walk into a church necessarily, getting them into groups, communities, and then some of them go on to help and serve in local churches as well. But I do think, yeah, that, our world is ever changing and it's hard to keep up with that. That's why something like the Brook, we can kind of be innovative and new and put all of our energy towards like this kind of one specific thing. And whereas a church sometimes, they have a lot of different groups and lots of different people they're trying to manage and engage in as well. And so, and if you have a system that's been working a certain way for so long, it's hard to shift that whole ship. Whereas I always say the Brook, like we're pretty mobile and we can try new things and be innovative. And it's just a little easier. So,
Yeah, and I'm not suggesting it's there's a single path at all that churches, that if you're not that it should be the end all be all. But I'm just curious, are you seeing a pretty high percentage of folks that get involved in these smaller groups going into churches and serving the church body as well there?
yeah. Yeah, that's a great question. I would say we have people coming into the rec from all different backgrounds. So some people come in that are new to faith. Some people come in that are coming back to faith. Like say maybe they grew up in the church, like, and we all hope like, oh, our kids are never going to fall away, right? But some people grew up in the church. They kind of have their own journey for a little bit and then they come back. So we have some people like that. And then we do have other people who have had a church kind of attendance their whole life. But I would say about 65 to 70% of people who get involved in, no, maybe more like 60% of people who get involved in the Brook, yeah, eventually do attend like a local church as well. And part of that reason being is mostly just the demographic of young professionals. They just really love community. Like they don't have a family yet. And so they want to be around as many people as they can. Proximity factor, the more people you're around, the more chances you are of meeting somebody, right? to maybe start a life with. But the other percentage, I would say, views the simple church as their form of church. Like I said, they're going to the mountains on Sundays, or maybe they just, that kind of idea of that traditional church setting doesn't really appeal to them.
Well, is this happening in other cities? Like, is there a Brook, or is there something similar that you've modeled, or of other people that are doing these things in other cities besides Denver?
Yeah. We've had so many people, and all cities reach out to us to ask if we would start a Brook in their city. But right now, we're honestly just doing coaching. Like, I love getting on calls, helping people, helping pass on anything we've learned from the Brook that could be helpful in other cities. And that was just even a vision of ours since the Brook started, is like, how can, if we, if we find anything that works, how can we share this kind of model in other cities? So yeah, we do a lot of coaching, but there isn't currently a Brook in any other cities right now.
It sounds like I think Stu probably like the business side of our brains is like, oh, I think there's a opportunity here.
Yeah.
I, I'm curious, you have a unique view into two different kind of cultures, right? You have a view into this young professional, a city life endeavor, and then you obviously have an inside view within your household and your kids and a generation below that. I'm curious how you actively and intentionally bridge that gap. Like, how do you prepare your kids with the knowledge that you have and that you've gained through your ministry with these young adults and these young professionals? I'm sorry. How does that change the way that you're interacting with leading, discipling your own children?
Absolutely. I honestly am so thankful for what I get to do because it allows me to be around a lot of young professionals. And so, just one benefit I get, and one thing that I would just encourage other parents to do is just, yeah, seek out some mentors. Like, if there's a youth group, or if there's like some people who are just like younger than your kids, because parents are cool until they're not that cool, right? And so our kids have a lot of other mentors in their life that are not us, that are younger, that are those kind of single young professionals that they get to see their lives. They get to see young professionals meet each other, get married in like a godly way, and they're friends. They see them at church, and so I think having just mentors in your kid's life to kind of see what you're saying be reiterated in the way that people that they look up to are living. So I think just, yeah, finding, and maybe that's even just, if you do go to a local church, or if you live in a community, just inviting like some people who are young professionals who are following God, like into your home, having them over for dinner, like having them around your children is just a really amazing thing. And then I think, yeah, just with social media, with phone usage, with things like that, just realizing like boundaries, just knowing that like just because all other parents are maybe letting their kids do whatever when it comes to social media or phone usage, that like our family isn't going to just do what everyone else says. Like, for example, like we have no phones in your bedroom, you can't be on the phone in the car. Like, our rule is like when you're with people, we be with people. Like, you're not on your phone. Like, if you're with a person, you're with that person, so no texting like in front of somebody unless it's like an emergency, right? And so I think just also, which can be really hard, it can be hard to be the family, or it can be hard to be the parent that feels like, hey, we're doing things differently. But I just keep telling myself, like, I'm not going to regret this when my kids are older. Like, God has given me the authority over my children. And so I'm going to stand before him someday and be responsible for the choices I made and how that's affected them. And so I also just think taking your role that God's given you seriously. Like, hey, this isn't just, oh yeah, we just had a kid, but it's like, no, like literally I am the authority over them. God's given me that authority. And because of that, like, I need to be careful and cautious about what I'm letting them watch, what I'm putting in front of them, how much time I'm giving them, or whatever that looks like.
One of your core values in the Brook is people over platforms.
Mhm.
What do you mean by that?
Yeah, and I love this value because the Brook actually started in the middle of COVID. So not at all what I expected. We always wanted, kind of the vision was to start some sort of young professionals movement, but it ended up being during COVID. So we launched online. And to be honest, like I didn't even have an Instagram personally. The first person we ever managed was like a brand manager, Instagram manager. And what we didn't want is to showcase like a specific leader. I think a lot of times organizations can be leader driven, and it's all based around one person and one personality. And that's exactly what we didn't want. Like, we wanted it to be showcasing everyday people. So even now, if you go on like our Instagram, you'll see everyday people in the Brook just sharing their stories and their real life, what's happening to them. And a lot of people message us on our Instagram and are like, is there somebody who leads this? Like, what is this even? And I absolutely love that, because we're not personality driven. We want people to see somebody they can identify with and not just like a figurehead. And so we want to really like allow the people in the Brook to be showcased, and it's not just like some platform that we're using for our vanity's sake. And so that's one of the values, and we just wanted to use that to also just protect ourselves. Like, hey, we're not going to go there. Like, pride can get in the way, right? It can be easy to uplift yourself, but that's just not the reason that we're doing what we're doing.
So good.
Love it. And I just want to highlight your other core values, just because I think they're awesome, and it actually hits really close to home. Stu and I developed core values for our businesses, and we were very, very intentional. And it was something that was a requirement from the two of us, that everything tied back to a biblical verse. So looking at your guys' core values and everything ties to the Bible, I'm like, I love it. But you guys say, pray first. We don't just welcome, we connect. We multiply disciples and develop leaders. We're crazy generosity, people over platforms, and innovation over stagnation. And I just love, that going to, because it's one of the things that Stu and I do as we look at guests is like, how do we align as well, right? And so looking at these core values, I was like, oh man, this is so awesome that each of those ties obviously breaks out and ties to biblical principles and biblical verses. But I just want to highlight those, no question there, because I think they're pretty self-explanatory, and they're awesome.
Cool.
But I'm curious, with your values and with your platform and everything you guys are doing, what is the future? What do you guys, when you're looking forward, what is the Brook?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So we're about a little over 4 years in, which is nice. I feel like even going into this fall, we're like, hey, we have rhythms, we have routines. I'm talking to my friends in startup world or other nonprofits that are like, oh my gosh, it takes 8 years to like get to a place where you feel like you're at a good point. And I think we're trying to figure out how to be sustainable, like most businesses, right? Like, what does this look like? One of the hardships can be with our demographic, we constantly have people coming and going, like coming, getting married, moving to a different city. So it's very transient. So trying to figure out, what does that look like? Um, but really right now, even when you asked about like, what about other cities? What about other places? That's something that we've contemplated, but really right now, I just feel like we want to double down on Denver. There's like 2% of people in Denver that follow Jesus. Over 50% of the city of Denver is between the ages of 20 and 40 years old. So that means if you come to the city, every other person you walk past is a young professional, and only 2% of them know Jesus. And so we still have a lot of work ahead of us. Like, we're making a dent, but I'm not satisfied with it. Like 500 people in simple churches, a couple thousand in our database is barely scratching the surface. And so we want to see in the next like 2 years, we'd love to see, 2,000 people in our simple churches and our networks around the city. And really our vision is to raise up leaders. So we want to continue to see our leadership teams grow, develop. Right now, we have about 50 people on our leadership teams. We have a couple hundred volunteers, but our leadership teams are people who are really multiplying and passing these things on. And so we want to continue to see those multiply and really just double down in the city of Denver is what we really feel like God's calling us to.
That's I love it. It's crazy that only 2% know Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Yeah.
eye-opening. Man. So how do we, the collective we audience, our listeners, get more involved? How do we support the Brook? How do we, I saw there's some like sponsorship opportunities for businesses.
Mhm.
How do us old married dudes with kids get involved with the Brook?
Yeah.
I'm talking specifically David. He just had a birthday recently, and he's over the hill. He's on his way down.
Oh my, you guys are amazing. I love it. Yeah, I think ways to get involved, there's definitely different options. I would say if you're somebody who has kids that are like in college or, graduating from college, just tell them about the Brook. Like, hey, you know what? Like, if you're coming back to Denver, definitely check out their happy hours, check out their events. Like, we want to be a place for you to like help send your kids. So if you do have kids that are like anywhere between in their 20s and 30s, definitely send them to our events. We want to help get them connected and plugged in. Something else we really love doing at the Brook is called mentor moments. And so this is where like people who are like maybe experts in an area that relates to young professionals outside of the 20 and 30-year age range, if there's some topic or that you are really passionate about or you think applies to our demographic, I'd love for you to reach out to me personally, Molly at the Brook.City, and say, hey, I would love to come in and share or do a video or something like that to kind of help this, whether it's finances or whether it's purpose or just things that are applicable to young professionals. And then, yeah, like you said, Stu, like we're a nonprofit, so we raise all of our own, funding and for all of our events and our marketing needs and all our staff. So if you guys, you're a business and even if you just are a business and you're looking for some good employees, like the Brook has like a huge network of young professionals. We actually on our app have a jobs posting place where like if you are looking to hire somebody and you want someone that has good values and might be a believer, like, you know what, we'd love to connect with you, partner with you to get that job posting up on our app, or even sponsor one of our events, help us with the cost by coming and just donating or coming and putting up a booth for us to kind of share about your business as well, and just different ways we can collaborate. And so, yeah, but I just love connecting with people in the city. I've been here, a little over 4 years, started during COVID. So I feel like even just networking with other people in the city is just a really awesome thing.
Well, and I don't know if we can nominate experts or subject matter experts, but I would personally like to nominate Stu for a mentor moment on how to live life to its fullest and be a successful business guy and not have to be that smart, right? And I think that could be like a really
But really
insightful
good looking.
presentation that Stu could probably offer these young professionals. So I think that would be just for consideration.
I like that tagline. I think that would be good. How to get ahead without doing much, maybe?
Yeah.
I don't know.
How to do good without being smart, like stuff like that.
Without
Yeah,
being
I think
smart. Okay.
we'll figure it out. We'll
I
figure it
think that'd
out.
be catchy. I think that could be catchy.
You'd have the biggest audience that you've ever had at one of those. Molly, this has
Oh,
been fun. We could probably go another hour and talk about all things community and relationships. Where do we send people to get more information on the Brook? What do we put in the show notes?
absolutely. Yeah. So our Instagram is great at the Brook.City. Our website, the Brook.City, or our app at the Brook.City. And then my personal email you can find on there as well if you want to reach out to me individually. I'd love to chat, love to connect more. And yeah, send any folks our way. We'd love to connect with them.
Awesome. Well, like I said, this has been a lot of fun. We appreciate your time. You're doing amazing work. And I'll steal David's line. You won't know until you get to heaven. And there's a line just saying thank you for everybody that you've had an impact on. So keep it
Oh,
up. Well
thanks.
done.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on.
You're welcome. Hey, guys and gals, we'll put all of the information in the show notes for the Brook. Go check it out and go take action. Thanks, Molly.
Yeah.
Thank you, Molly.